Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschitade Satarane. I welcome everyone for attending this summer gathering here at Stuyvesant Falls. I express my gratitude for your all coming. I'm very happy to be here with you. I especially thank Jayadvaita Swami. It is nice and prestigious that senior devotees are here, and I'm happy that everyone is here. I will attempt to speak some introductory words, but today I was not intending to give a half-hour spontaneous talk. I no longer give many lectures. I used to when I was younger. I don't have the ability to give lectures like Jayadvaita Swami and Rabindra Sarup does. Both these devotees are in their 70s and they give regular full classes. They are exemplary preachers. I'm sorry for not speaking extemporaneously today, but I think one of the main features of the festival is kirtan and sumptuous feast, and we will have plenty of that today. Haribol. Since I don't have the ability to give an organized lecture, I thought I would compensate by using my writing ability and read to you some excerpts from a book I wrote. The book is called The Best of a Bad Bargain. It's about how to remain Krishna conscious while coping with chronic illness, old age, etc. I am embarrassed to read this book before Jayadvaita Maharaj, who just intimately and recently accompanied His Holiness Kadamba Krishna Maharaj in the last 6 months of his life as he was dying from cancer. Kadamba Kanana Maharaj dealt with cancer in an exemplary way. He took no painkillers, which is extraordinary. He lectured to his disciples until the very end. My dealing with chronic illness pales by comparison to the austerities Kadamba Kanana Maharaj underwent so wonderfully and which Jayadvaita Maharaj witnessed firsthand. I have my own experience with 20 years of chronic migraine in the right eye, for which I did take medication. And now at 83, I have the experience of old age with its maladies. Now I'll read some excerpts from The Best Use of a Bad Bargain. It was written during a month's stay at a naturopath yoga institute in India some years ago. You can't see it very well, but here's the book. It's got a picture on the cover with a man in a wheelchair. And I'm going to read from the note to the reader. After considering the various Ayurvedic and naturopathic clinics recommended to us by devotees, we finally chose the Yoga Naturopath Clinic near Madras. I accept my headaches as karma sent by Krishna, but I am sometimes still willing to practice a sensible health regimen to help me better use what Krishna has given me. So anyway, I called this book The Best Use of a Bad Bargain in two ways. One, as Prabhupada used the expression, we have taken these material bodies. They are not good, but we can nevertheless make the best use of them by using them in Krishna's service. Now here is a quote from Prabhupada's lecture. I require this for maintenance of my body, therefore I accept it. In other words, just to make the better use of a bad bargain. I am now materially encaged, so I must make the best use of this body by dovetailing myself with Krishna. Krishna Sambandhe, Nirbandhe, Krishna Sambandhe, unquote. Going to the health clinic was in that spirit. And the second reason I used the title was by writing I could make the best use of my time, otherwise spent outside the association of devotees and apart from direct preaching. I am embarrassed to read this book before Jayadvaita Maharaj. Oh, I read that. Now I'll read some excerpts from the book, Best Use of a Bad Bargain, December 8th. I don't have the year. This morning I found a statement about sannyas that Prabhupada made in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, quote, although the sannyasis we have initiated in ISKCON are young, used to be young, we have awarded them the titles of the renounced order of life, Swami, Goswami, because they have completely dedicated their lives to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, C.C. Adi, etc. When Prabhupada handed me my danda in 1972, he said, preach, preach, preach. That is why he gave sannyas. I followed Srila Prabhupada's 3 times repeated order, preach, 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 for a number of years. In years since then, the migraine headache syndromes developed. I've had to retire from a lot of active preaching. Recently I found that I couldn't do any preaching events, couldn't guarantee to be where I said I would be. So often I was having to cancel due to pain, and people were becoming disappointed. Since coming to this health clinic, however, I have increased my desire to preach and my hope that it will be possible. I don't know if it's possible until I leave here and give it a try. I plan to discuss this with the doctor this morning, although there's nothing he can really say, except to introduce me to a naturopathic regimen of self-care and try to inspire me with the confidence that following it, forgot my finger. Oh, you have one. Confidence will give my health to a stronger point. Even if my health doesn't improve, I should be happy. Srila Prabhupada says, now here's a great purport. I'll tell you where it's from. Adi Leela 12:37. Prabhupada's purport. Devotees should always be happy with the dealings of their master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee may be put into difficulty or opulence, but he should accept both as gifts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and jubilantly engage in the service of the Lord in all circumstances. One should not be unhappy when reverse comes upon him by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee should always be happy to receive the fortune awarded him by the Supreme Lord, which seems pleasant or unpleasant according to one's judgment. Now here's another excerpt. No, I don't have another excerpt under that category. But going to another category, what old age brings. Old age is not a subject matter of interest just to a few senior citizens. It is crucial for everyone to know what old age brings and how to face it. Since old age is one of the four miseries of life, Srila Prabhupada wrote about it extensively in his writings. Of all the references, this one is my favorite. If a person is Krishna conscious, he can work like a young man, even if he is 75 or 80 years old. Thus, the daughter of Kala, time, cannot overcome a Vaishnava. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita when he was very old, yet he presented the most wonderful literature about the activities of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami began their spiritual lives at a very old age. Better?
I'm just going to, so you don't knock your glasses on.
Okay.
No, to speak as loud.
I'll say that again. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami began their spiritual lives at a very old age. That is, after they retired from their occupations and family lives. Yet they presented many valuable literatures for the advancement of spiritual life. Then there's a quote from one of my books. Then we also, there's a page missing. No, I didn't turn it. Yes, here it is. This is a quote from the Bhagavatam, 4th canto. Thus, Jara, the effect of old age, does not harass a devotee. This is because a devotee follows the instructions and determinations of Narada Muni. Consequently, old age does not make a devotee fearful of death, as a common man is fearful of death. Thus, instead of depressing a devotee, advanced age helps him become fearless and thus happy. Then I write, quoting one of my books, Life with the Perfect Master. When I was serving Srila Prabhupada in Bombay, 1974, he once said something about old age to myself and to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada said, "Go and preach and remain active. When you're old enough, then you can go and sit down in Mayapur and simply chant Hare Krishna." But Srila Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, What does old enough mean? Srila Prabhupada said, that has to be judged by the individual. As for myself, I am not so old. Then we also, Srila Prabhupada, I said, will follow your example and never say we are old enough to stop preaching. Life with the Perfect Master, page 86. When Srila Prabhupada gave us this advice, I was only 34 years old, and I replied with bravado. Now the meaning of his words seems more poignant. I wonder if I will actually be able to do as he did up to the fag end of my existence in this body. In fact, Srila Prabhupada set an example of a glorious old age that none of us can imitate. He came to America when he was 70 years old. His health was so weak that the patron who gave him boat passage was afraid he would die en route. There were many inconveniences Prabhupada had to face due to old age and disease, but they never disturbed his pure Krishna consciousness. Even externally, he often refused to succumb to the dictates of the maladies, variously diagnosed as diabetes, poor indigestion, and many others. He or his followers would call for doctors periodically, but Srila Prabhupada rarely took their prescriptions or followed their regimens. He once remarked, "We are not Dr. Das, we are Krishna Das." In Hari Sari's Transcendental Diary, we read details about how Prabhupada overcame situations of deteriorating health and old age and continued his powerful preaching. We cannot imitate Srila Prabhupada, but we should try to follow the spirit of his example. We may be forced to give up certain stressful services and no longer be able to keep up the physical pace with those who are younger. But we should never think of retiring from Krishna consciousness. Even as we are forced to limit our activities in some ways, we will find that our capacities in other areas of Krishna consciousness are increasing. In many societies, elders are seen as a resource. They are honored because of their accumulated experience and wisdom. As we grow old, we should not look for welfare or economic benefits given to old-timers, but we should try to live up to devotees' expectations of us and try to keep an example of trust in Krishna, attachment to chant, not give up attachment to chanting, never, and a desire to help others on the path. But old age can indeed be very grim. This is compounded by the fact that old age usually appears just before death, and death is the time when our next life is determined. Srila Prabhupada wrote, the period just before death is very dangerous because it is the time people are attacked by the weakness of old age, as well as many kinds of diseases. Bhagavatam 4 purport. In an better drink some water. Honey stuck in my throat. Good purport coming up. In another purport, Prabhupada pulls no punches for the old men. Quote, the body has 9 gates, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, rectum and genitals. When one is harassed by the invalidity of old age, various diseases manifest at the gates of the body. For example, the eyes become so dim that one requires spectacles. The ears become so weak to hear directly, therefore one requires hearing aids. When the nostrils are blocked by mucus, one has to always sniff an enema bottle containing ammonia. Similarly, the mouth becomes too weak to chew and requires false teeth. The rectum gives one trouble, and the evacuation process becomes difficult. Sometimes one has to take enemas, and sometimes a surgical nozzle to accelerate the passing of urine. Bhagavatam 4:28-4. How do these hard facts about the miseries of old age tend with the optimistic statement that the devotees are not attacked by old age? Devotees may not be attacked to tribbles as they engage the body, but their Krishna consciousness will prevent them from being affected with mental debility or bodily malfunctioning. A sense of humor helps. If we had any last vestige of trying to enjoy ourselves, old age is ridding us of all other illusions. The idea of illicit sex becomes absurd. Even Srila Prabhupada joked about his old age maladies. He said, unless 3 men carry me, I cannot move. And when he was offered a big plate of prasadam while conversing with professors, Prabhupada chuckled and said, I have no teeth and I have no appetite. Srila Prabhupada always unflinchingly engaged in pure devotional service, and we, his followers, were inspired to see his example despite his apparent difficulties, which were brought on by his old age. Srila Prabhupada also explained to us why one should be fearless in old age. Quote, we are transmigrating from one body to another, exactly like our present life. Just like all of us here, we had a body, a small baby body. Where is that body? That body is gone. So far, I am an old man. I remember when I was a small boy, a baby. I still remember when I was about 6 months old. I was lying down on the lap of my elder sister. She was knitting, and I was lying down and playing. I remember. So it is possible for everyone to remember that I had a small body, then I had a boy's body, and then I had a youthful body. Now I am in this body. So where are those bodies? That body is gone. It is a different body. That is explained in Bhagavad Gita, Tata Dehantara Praktir. Similarly, when I give up this body, I'll have to accept another body. Bhagavad Gita 7.1, lecture, Gainesville, 1971. By his own example, Srila Prabhupada taught us that we must practice tolerance when old age comes. Quote, I'll tell you where it's from. lecture in Boston, April 28, 1969. You have to undergo the tribulation of old age. It does not mean because you have a princely body that there will be no disease. No. The disease will be there, and death will be there, and the suffering of old age, just like I am an old man. I've got sometimes sufferings, headache, backache, disache, old man, you see, rheumatic. So these things are to be suffered. Therefore, all our sufferings are due to this body. And this human body is the junction, the crossing point, whether I want to cure myself completely from this disease of birth, death, old age, and disease, or whether I want to continue. That we must make a decision. That's old age. Now we go to a different chapter, living with chronic disease. This was written when I had migraine headaches. I have been struggling for 15 years with chronic migraine headaches. I can no longer distinguish between the illness's intrusion in my life and the life itself. Headaches have become a part of me as much as my hands, my eyes, or devotional work I perform every day. Over the years, I've followed different health regimens, and I'm currently working with an allopathic specialist. Although Vedic culture favors the Ayurveda school of treatment, Srila Prabhupada did not insist that his disciples get treated by the Ayurvedic process. Being pragmatic, Prabhupada allowed his disciples to follow whatever medical cures were suitable for devotees and available locally. The two characteristics that typified Prabhupada's attitude toward illnesses were, one, that it is a serious thing and should be treated promptly, and two, that one ultimately has to depend on Krishna for the results. I have noticed over the years that more and more devotees are contracting illnesses, either acute or chronic, and it seems that this is more likely to happen as the devotees grow older. As a doctor once said, quote, "If you live long enough, you will probably develop a chronic disease, cancer, pulmonary disease, arthritis, Parkinson's disease, and so on. I take no glee in saying this. I only want to remind you that flesh, like all things, inevitably decays and dies. Chronic illness is part of a normal process." From a book, Be Sick, Well, by Jeff Kane, MD. Then, no more hymn. Since so many of us are going to have to contend with illnesses, and since chronic illness changes our self-image and our personalities in various ways, it is important for us to know and follow what Prabhupada has instructed in this matter. Depending on Krishna also means that although we should try to cure our illness, which I wrote between 33 and 44 years ago when I was editor of Bhakti-Guided magazine, I found the essays not outdated or immature. Neither, indeed, I found them relevant, and the debates were still up to date. So I thought, actually, the writing in these books is simple and fresh and different than the writing I took on later when I tried to experiment in language. But they're very straightforward and simple and short, and as I said, they're up to date. And here's the third volume, Back to Godhead, 1991 to 2002. And this has a great note in it. Back to Godhead Essays, 1991 to 2001. And this was written by Jayadvaita Swami, who was then the editor-in-chief of Bhakti Godhead, published in volume 25, January 1991. Each of our columnists, he says, focuses on a specific area of interest, but I suggested to Satsvarupa Das Goswami that he take on a special portfolio, quote, write about whatever you want, unquote. So for each issue, he'll precisely do that. It looks like he put me on the beginning trail to write whatever I want. I don't know whether he's to blame for that or what. But these 3 collections of essays are there, and they're very readable. And if you don't like my poetry or experimental writing, you'll like these. Then a book which came out just a few days ago, arriving here. It's a journal that I wrote. It's called Worshipping with the Pen, the Journals of Satsvarupa Das Goswami, Volume 1, 2022, anticipating more volumes. And I wrote about journal writing on page 130, and about myself in my writing attempts. After writing Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and then 16 books on Srila Prabhupada, I should mention something about that. In the year 2022, we we distributed here at the festival in the summer the first 8 of those 16 books about Prabhupada, exclusively about Prabhupada. Then in the winter, we published a second group of 8. Now those books are still available here today, all 16 of them. And we don't break the books up into single books to buy, but you have to buy 8 at a time. I can't break up the sets.
Very good price.
At good prices, says my assistant. Okay, so I wrote about journals in the middle of a journal. When I have accumulated 400 pages, I will send it to Krishna Bhajan, who will clean up the manuscript and divide it into chapters. When it is finally printed, I will take some copies to our disciples' meeting and speak to the devotees as follows, while I hold up the book for them to see. You can't see it so well, but I'm holding it up. And I wrote, after writing Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, 16 books on Srila Prabhupada, and almost 200 books on Krishna Katha for the devotees of ISKCON, I felt that my volcano of creative writing had erupted and blown out. I had nothing left to say. I couldn't write another book about Srila Prabhupada, and I didn't feel qualified to write a commentary on scriptures, but my writing desires were unabated. So I started a journal. Many authors have kept journals, and their fans like to read them and find out more about the personal life of the writer. In the future, some seekers who like to read journals may look into this book. I've brought some copies today, and you can purchase one if you like. Although it's mostly about a Western person coming to Krishna consciousness and Rasa Shastra, I felt the presence of Prabhupada and Krishna as I wrote. So that book is here today too. And that's about all I had to say, I think. Now the next thing is browsing at the book table. Where's the book table? Oh, right over there.
John Nardarishi.
Nardarishi?
Nardarishi, sir.
He's taking care of the book table.
And John.
And John Endler. Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.